What am I even watching? How you going? Welcome to my review of Star Trek Picard Season 1, Episode 2, Maps and Legends. So this episode starts on the Utopia Planitia shipyards on Mars. And the workers there are teaching the android who is working with them jokes, and they're basically bullying it. They're big meanies. So this one android is called F8. Now I'm wondering if that's a reference to Fate. Is this like the fate of this entire plotline? So Fate hacks the Gigabyte mainframe on this shipyard and disables the planetary defenses. The workers then try to stop Fate and he kills them all and then kills himself. The end. So after the opening title, we're in Picard's house again and they're discussing the attack on Dahj. Now, Dahj is a very hard character to talk about because nothing happens to her. She's basically an empty vessel who's there just to move the plot along. So Laris, who is Picard's female butler, reveals that she was a Tal Shiar operative, which is like the Romulan Secret Service. And Zarbin, who is Picard's male butler, revealed that his mum was part of the Tal Shiar too. And they talk about legends of an even secreter Secret Service called the Zhat Vash, or the Zhat Vash. Now they appear to be the boogeyman of Romulan society who really hates robots. You can see where this is going. So apparently there was no trace left of either Dahj or the assassins or any kind of like explosive residue or anything. I don't know how that happens because it was a pretty massive explosion. There would have been bits everywhere. They must have beamed all the bits out of there or something. I don't know. So it seems like someone somehow has arranged it so that no one's going to investigate this explosion on the roof of the Federation archives, or very close to it. Like, shouldn't Starfleet kind of be in lockdown? So it seems like they've combined two scenes into one here, because Picard and Laris are in the apartment that Dahj was attacked in, and then next minute they're in Picard's study. And this scene is weird because they teleport into Dahj's apartment, but later on Picard has to use like a slipgate thing to teleport into the Federation. Maybe it's a security thing, like you can't teleport into the Federation buildings, but you can teleport into random houses. So it's mentioned in this scene that the Romulans don't have androids. Now, I don't know if that's true or if that's been contradicted by the TV shows or movies in the past. But apparently they just use computers for doing calculations. So Laris uses her Romulan secret police technology to recreate the scene out of like residue from atoms or something. So she says that the room has been scrubbed of residue because otherwise her Romulan CSI technology would work. I don't think we'll be seeing this thing ever again, so it doesn't really matter. So they're like, if this place has been scrubbed to make it look like nothing happened, then they'll make it appear that nothing has happened. So instead of there being a blank tape, it'll be like a tape that's recorded white noise. So Laris says that like there should be some residue somewhere because they'll leave little hints of it to make it seem like it hasn't been scrubbed. So then Picard picks up a metal bar and says, "Oh, what about this?" And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? And then it turns out that it's a phone. A video phone. So apparently all these Romulan secret police techniques are untraceable. Except for using this one special technique. Luckily, Laris knows about it. So they find that Dahj's phone mistook her for Soji, who's her sister, apparently. And then it corrected itself and identified them as two separate people, but it had a record that there was a mistake. So this record of the computer correcting itself led them to identify which messages were incoming from Soji. And Picard says that this is like a ghost in the machine. Ooh, spooky! So this is one of this episode's unnecessarily flowery dialogue sequences. So Laris says that messages that get sent via subspace have a little message appended to the end of each packet. And because these messages have this code appended to each of the packets, that means that her communication is coming from outer space. So that means that she's not on Earth. And for some reason, Picard is shocked by this in Star Trek, that there's people living on other planets or in space. Space. So I'm wondering why they ran this forensic scan inside the apartment. Because they knew that the assassins had been in that apartment, so maybe they'll return. Like, couldn't they take the telephone rod thing with them back to Picard's house? Or do telephones in the future still use landlines? So then we go back to the Borg cube. And apparently the Romulans are harvesting the Borg tech and selling it for a profit. Who they would sell it to and for what, I don't know. So I'm trying to work out whether this organization is a privately run entity or if it's part of the government. And do the Romulans even have a government anymore? Like, their home world got blown up, so wouldn't all their leaders have gone with them? I suppose it was 20 years ago, so they could have formed a government on another planet. So Narek and Soji are in bed together, and luckily they're wearing their black underwear while they're getting down to business. Because then they can get out of bed when the alarm goes off. And apparently they can't tell anyone that they're in a relationship because of reasons. I don't understand this because the way that they're talking, it seems like 1 minute he's like the boss of this organization and then the next minute he sounds like he's just some pleb. And then he claims that he's a very private person, which gets me to thinking, are Romulans even people? Is people just a word that we apply to human beings, or does it apply to any sentient creature? I mean, in Measure of a Man, do they actually try to work out if Data is a person or just if he's alive? But I guess if corporations can be people. So they're talking English and then Narek says one sentence in Romulan. I'm assuming it's Romulan. It has subtitles and I can't understand it. But then Soji can understand it. So would that raise red flags? Like, why does this woman know how to speak Romulan? She's clearly not Romulan. She doesn't have pointy ears. But I digress. So then we have kind of a pointless, aimless scene where Picard's visited by his doctor. Apparently he needs to get clearance to go on a ship. I wasn't aware that he was going on a ship. But he offers him some Earl Grey, which is unusual for this show. So it turns out that Picard has a problem with his parietal lobe, which is apparently the part of the brain that governs spatial awareness. Get it? Spatial? Space? So I assume the doctor gives him his clearance because he ends up going to Starfleet. And Picard goes and visits an admiral. You don't find out her name straight away. These shows have a habit of doing this. Hello, Admiral. 5 hours later. Oh, so your name is Admiral Steve. Yes. Oh, okay, so now we know that their name is Steve. So Picard goes to the Admiral and he wants a ship and a small crew. And he wants to go find out where Maddox is because he believes he's using parts of Commander Data. He also mentions that he'll be willing to take a demotion to Captain. Get it? Because it's Captain Picard. Oh my god! So this Admiral's ticked off at Picard because he basically tried to help the Romulans and she was like, the Romulans are our enemies. So Picard asks her, do we get to decide who lives and dies and which species go extinct? And she replies, yes. Apparently a number of planets didn't like the fact that the Romulans were part of the Federation, so it was either get rid of the Romulans or lose 14 planets. So this is where we find out why Picard had to lose it in that TV interview. He had to basically take a dig at Starfleet so that then they could hold a grudge against him. And therefore they can easily refuse his request for a ship. So back on the Borg cube, and Dahj is helping some Trill newbie to get dressed. I don't know why. I'm not sure if there's some significance to her being a Trill, but she has like all the dots down the side of her face and down her neck, like the symbiotes do. I'm sure they're just ticking some boxes here. Romulans, check. Vulcans, check. Humans, check. Trill, symbiotes, check. And this Trill is trying to get residency. It's been knocked back a couple times by the Romulan Free State. So apparently the Romulans have created some form of government after the destruction of their home planet. And it makes me wonder why there's all these humans and different races here. Like, if they're doing something dodgy with the Borg, wouldn't they want to keep it in-house? So it makes me wonder, is it private enterprise? Because private enterprises will basically throw anyone under the bus to make a profit. Damn you, capitalism! So they get a briefing, and apparently some parts of the cube haven't been cleared out yet, so they have to keep an eye out for rogue Borgs. So this introduction by the Borg Research Institute feels a bit like one of those laser tag games where they have actors introduce you to aspects of the game and tell you, if you haven't got your pulse rifle yet, head over to the armory and retrieve one right away. And they make you feel like you're part of the movie. But oh my god, that trill's like totally hot for Romulans. So while they're getting this briefing, there's a sign that says that it's been 5,487 days or thereabouts since they've had an assimilation. So I'm wondering, like, do people get assimilated? So that makes it about 15 years. And they get told that if their badge turns green, they should run. Like, isn't green usually good? These damn Romulans. So Narek says that when the cube suffers a submatrix collapse, it severs the connection with all the other Borg cubes in the hive. And the rest of the Borgs just see it as a graveyard. And I noticed that he doesn't mention that they're grave robbing. But he does seem to imply that Soji's there for resurrection. Maybe his erection, am I right? So Narek asks Soji if he could watch her perform her duties, and she says, you'll need approval to watch. So I'm confused again, like, is he a pleb or is he the leader? And then he looks off creepily and says, actually I don't. So I think he's going to be a Zat. So if he can pull the strings like that, I think it's pretty obviously that he's going to be Zat Vash. Or Romulan Secret Service. Secret Service. So then we go back to Chateau Picard. And Agnes, who's that blonde robot doctor, is looking at Picard's books. And she has a copy of iRobot. And Picard says that he never really liked science fiction because I guess he just doesn't get it. Go get it! Fourth wall slam! And then he offers her tea and she says, I'll have Earl Grey. Get it? Oh my god, Earl Grey reference back to back with a fourth wall slam! Combo! So he keeps making tea with tea bags, even though in the first episode he orders his replicator to make him a cup of Earl Grey decaf. Does he just not like the replicated teas? Or is making tea part of the process? Or is this some sort of a rejection of technology on Picard's behalf? I doubt it. I think the special effects are just too expensive. So Agnes says that it makes sense for Maddox, if he's going to create new robots from data, that he should model them on a painting that he painted. But apparently Picard has the only 2 copies and one of them's locked away in a vault. Like, why wouldn't he model these new robots off data? Or off himself? Or off anyone? Like, if making artificial life forms is illegal, why would you then make them look like a face that someone is going to later recognize? If Picard ever saw their faces, he would be like, oh, that looks like the face from the painting. So therefore, this person must somehow be related to Data. And then Agnes says that Dahj is like 3 years old. I don't know why. I guess these robots must be made fully grown then and don't have a childhood. So we're back on the cube and they're dismantling some Borgs. And it turns out that Soji is just like a stenographer. She's taking notes while someone else is removing parts from the Borg. So the person who's removing the parts from the Borg calls them nameless. And I think she's just referring to the species as nameless because they've never encountered this species and they don't know what to call them. But apparently Soji is so upset about them being referred to as being nameless. And then she goes over and like puts her hand on one of them and it sounds like the pulse slows down. It's weird. And then she speaks to them and says like, your fight's over or something. And she says it in an unidentified language that needs subtitles. But I'm not sure if she's just speaking in Romulan for the sake of the Romulans or if she can speak the language of this unknown species. So then Picard goes to his desk and he pulls out a box. And I'm like, I bet you this is his comm badge. And it turns out that it is his comm badge. And he puts it on, and straight away I'm thinking, they would never let you keep that. That's Starfleet property. And then I looked up on Memory Alpha, and it said that as a symbol of loss of membership in Starfleet, personnel that had resigned or had been relieved of duty were required to turn in their comm badges. Good one. So people had worked this out by watching other TV episodes and watching other movies. So Picard taps his comm badge and speaks, hello, Raffi, I need a ship. And I was like, who is Raffi? I've never heard this name before. Well, it turns out you need to read the comic that came out before Picard was released. So I'm wondering if Picard could have got a ship off Raffi all along, then why did he have to go and appeal to Starfleet? Like, now he's just let Starfleet know what his intentions are. I guess he had to find some way to notify the Romulans that he was coming, which is exactly what the next scene tells us. So the Admiral, who turns out to be Admiral Clancy, is calling Commodore O. And Clancy is telling O about Picard visiting her. And O says that if Romulans were running clandestine operations on Earth, she would know about it. And I'm like, do you know what clandestine means? And then she calls in Rizzo! And then there's more Earl Grey. Oh, and did we mention that Picard's looking after grapes? And then Zarbin says that Picard needs a new crew, so why doesn't he go see Riker, Worf, and LaForge? And Crusher! No, not Crusher. And Picard says that he can't, because they'll agree to do it out of loyalty, and he'll get them killed. So Zarbin says, you just need to find someone who hates you, and has nothing to lose. So back at Starfleet, it turns out that Rizzo is running covert ops. And did I mention lens flare? And this scene with Commander O has the best thumping bass. It's a good substitute for drama, and they make a point of emphasizing unexpected and undercover and all the U words. So it seems like the Romulans are trying to capture a robot, not kill it, capture it. But they hate the robots, so why wouldn't they just kill it? I'm sure we'll find out later. And it turns out that Narek is Rizzo's brother. And Commodore O says to Rizzo, see that neither of you fail. See that neither of you does. And I'm like, does? Don't you mean see that neither of you do? So then Picard catches a space taxi over to the goddamn Gorn rocks.
That's Vasquez rocks for you and I.
Now, it turns out that those rocks have been in like 4 movies and 5 episodes of Star Trek. They just keep getting reused and reused. And guess what they've done here? They've reused them. And it turns out that Raffi is living in a caravan at Vasquez Rocks. And she pretty much seems like a straight rip-off of Sarah Connor. So she tries to drive Picard off and says there's nothing that you could say that I would want to hear. Except for that there's secret Romulan assassins operating on Earth, and she's a wino. So Rizzo's not happy with Narek's approach to whatever he's doing. There's a lot of talk about missions that they don't actually talk about what the mission is. And it seems like Narek's approach is to make love to the robot until she reveals the location of their home base. So they're trying to hunt these androids' home base down. They're trying to track them back to their nest. I'm assuming that's like where Maddox is. I'm just worried that on the way to destroy them, that Narek will actually fall in love. So this episode was pretty boring, pretty confusing, lacking in information. I feel like watching Patrick Stewart is just like you're watching Patrick Stewart, not Jean-Luc Picard. So what really confuses me is that Picard's opened his home to 2 secret police operatives. Did he know that they were secret police before he invited them to his house? Is he using them? Does Starfleet know that he has 2 Romulan operatives in his house? I mean, considering Starfleet hates Romulans enough to want them to die when their homeworld is destroyed by a supernova. And this show has a habit that I hate, which is they introduce a new character, talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes, and don't actually give them a name. And then people refer to them by their name, and you're like, who is that? And then 30 minutes later, someone will address them by their name. And you're like, so that's the person they were talking about. They did this with both Clancy and O. And I've got to say that I don't care about anyone in this series. Like, they could put people in grave danger and I wouldn't care 2 bits. And if we get any more references to Earl Grey or grapes again, I'm going to scream. So basically this episode's no better than the previous one. I'm going to give it a 6 again. They've only got another 8 episodes left in the season, and I don't know how they're going to get a full story out of it. I guess we're just going to end on a cliffhanger then. So that's it for my review of Star Trek Picard Season 1 Episode 2 Maps and Legends. I hope you enjoyed the review more than I enjoyed this episode. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.